off. Okay. Hi to those joining from online. Great to have you here. And hello to everyone in the room. We finished before the break with tutorial 2. So if you remember, I gave some background information on Google Earth Engine. We ran tutorial 1, which showed us about variables, about scripts, about strings, about numbers and dates. In tutorial 2, we put that to use, and we also learned about images and how to create a map. And already with this simple 24 lines very interesting map that told us a lot. And we also learned how much we can change this with just replacing a few numbers or letters. We can do the same analysis in a completely different part of the world, and it can look completely different. So just to recap a little bit, we have some different layers that already tell us so much different information. Okay, with tutorial 3, it's also quite simple, and we're going to learn how we can put our own data into Google Earth Engine. So our own boundaries, so that we can flip this information to what we care about. Okay, so let's start a new script. Remember, in scripts, make new, and click file. We've done this before, so we know it. Make sure you're in the right place. Type in what you like it to be called. I'll go to tutorial 3. Hit OK. Make sure it's where you want it to be. Oops. And there we have it. It's blank. So open up your files. And tutorial 3 is even shorter than the other ones. So it's getting simpler now. Tutorial 3. And paste. Okay, 21 lines. So 3 less. Okay. The first part of this tutorial, you can already go ahead and save. That's a good idea. And now, we're not going into this at all. Go to your Assets tab. So I mentioned before the break that this is where we can input our own data. And you can see that I already have a folder for Learning You, and I already have the data in there. So now you can all do this too. So click on New, and if you want to add a folder, you can. Just go there, name it what you want, hit Enter. I'll give you a bit of time if you want to make a folder. And if or if not you have a folder, now we can add the file. So to do that, we're adding a shape file. We're going to add the boundary of Learning National. If you click to upload a new shape file, you're going to see this. And you have to select the data. So in this case, it's very important for you to know where you saved it on your computer. So when you click select, you get your normal file tree. And here, I'm going to actually go to the USB drive, go to session 3. Okay.
Jadi ini kita mau upload file ya, file dari USB.
I'm going to redo this process. Also quickly, for those joining online, you can also do this process, but for a different shapefile. If you have a shapefile that exists, go ahead and use that. If not, don't worry, because I'll have an alternative for you. But if you have a shapefile, even for those in the room, if you want to run this code on a different shapefile, a different boundary than what has been given to you, you're also welcome to do that. So here we were. Let's start again. New shapefile. Okay. Now, select.
Ya, jadi kita akan menambahkan script file ya.
So in the session 3 folder, you can see this lorlindu_boundaries file. Now this is what we're going to select and upload. But if you can see behind, only certain file types are accepted. So you'll have to make sure that you don't have one or try to upload one that is not accepted. So we have zip, shapefile, DBF, PRJ, yeah. Basically all that we have, but let's check that there's not one that we can't have. So CPG is good. DBF here is also good. PRJ is also good. SBN also good. If you look, SBX is not in the file types that are allowed. So skip that one. But SHP and SHX are good. Okay? So click all except SBX. If you try to upload the SBX, it will have an error and say not accepted. Once you have all selected, click OK. Okay? You can see that it automatically filled in a name, which you can keep, or you can change it if you want. So I'm going to say Lori underscore ROI. But just like with the variable names, you can pick whatever you like to name. Lori Lindu, capital L, underscore ROI. This is what I will use. Once you have all of that, click upload.
Ya, kita ya ikutin ya.
And now, you can see that the task tab is orange, not blue. So if you go there, we can see what's happening. And it finished so fast, so I don't know if you had a second to see, but at first it showed you the request. And now it's processing. When it's processing, you see the Google Earth engine icon rotating. And you see the amount of time that it's been running. And when it finishes, it will be blue, just like the other ones.
Ya, ini proses uploading ya. Kalau udah biru, ya sudah oke semuanya. Ada tanda centang.
And yeah, depending on the size of the file that you're trying to upload, it can take a few minutes. But yeah, that's it. Okay. And sometimes it will keep showing that it's running, But if you want to see the current status, just click to another tab, like the console, click back, and you see it's already uploaded. Yeah. So if you see that it's loading, click to the console tab and click back to tabs, and then you can see if it's still loading or if it's already finished. So you could just click here and click back, and then mine you can see is already finished. Okay, great. So it's looking good. All right, then we're ready to keep going. So I had mentioned before that once you upload your assets, it's so easy to use them. And this is true. So all that we have to do, so now we go back to the script, right? We're about to run tutorial 3, which is uploading and visualizing data or assets. Now that we've uploaded our asset, all that we have to do to use this information is be in the Assets tab, find the file that we want to run, and click this button. And you can see when you hover over it, it says import into script, and it's an arrow. So you click, and you can see it's there. We'll have an import section. So this says, now, what variable it is, the variable name, it's automatically generated as table. And then you can see what the file is. Yes. Okay, this is an important part. You have to click this button. Yeah, right. And then you see that it pops up. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Right, I actually uploaded the previous file, but the one that I just uploaded was, you remember, Laura, they do ROI. And I can also put this one into the. So yeah, if you upload an asset, it won't show up here until you click this refresh asset. Yeah, refresh. Yeah. So now, hopefully it's there for everybody. Thumbs up. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so I will go with the new file. So we're doing this together. And you see, if you want to remove, if I had the wrong one, I just click delete. Again. Next to it is delete.
Yeah.
So click delete, click OK, and it's gone. So I think we're ready to go. Let's first take the /* from line 5 and put it on line 9. So if for some reason your map center was also still commented and still green, just hit space and backspace and then it should be good to run. Yeah. So you can see in the comments I put an extra sort of challenge of 9 specifies zoom. You can change this value, but we already know this from before. Okay, so all that we're doing now is setting to where we want to be. Now you can already move this again. And let's just take it to the bottom. Yeah, this is a very simple tutorial. So now you can see in line 12, we are defining a variable. So ROI stands for region of interest. And this is what we want to look at, right? We want to look at the new file that we just uploaded. But if we run the code as it is, we're going to get an error. So I can show you. If we run, we go to the console, it says Lower Lindu is not defined. And that's because when you input the asset, it gets an automatic label. It gets an automatic variable name of table 2. But we want something that is more descriptive. So we change this to Lore.
Dan dipahami ya, pada saat import itu otomatis dia akan memberikan nama dengan tabel. Sementara tabel itu sementara di bawah itu namanya pada Lore itu adalah Lore itu gitu ya. Seperti nanti.
Now we're going to press run and let's see what happens. Nothing. But if you see on line 15, we added a layer, right? We added this data into our map. But what happened? If we go to our layers tab, you see that there's region of interest here. And if you click, it shows up. And what happened here, the reason that it doesn't show up until you activate it is this line that says false, or this part that says false. And this can be a very useful tip when you're running a lot of data and you're making a lot of different maps. Sometimes it takes too long to keep running them all if you're doing multiple. So yeah, this is just a way to speed up your efficiency when you're doing experimental work. Yeah. So in this case, we only want to see it when we click it on. If you remove this line, it will come right away. And that's it. That was tutorial 3. Not too bad, right?
Tadi pahami ya? Ini to repeat more.
Sure. Okay.
Tadi kan yang diupload ada 4 data vektor yang di teks itu. Situ ada muncul 4. Nah, sementara sama kita cuma 1.
Ya, jadi gini. Tadi yang itu kan sesungguhnya import itu adalah menaruh di apa namanya? Di cloud. Ya, disimpan dulu di cloud nih. Ya, 4 tadi kan. Tapi yang baru Bapak baru dipanggil tadi cuma 1 tuh. Yang di atas. Kan nanti ada import. Baru diimport 1. Ya. Kalau import nanti berikutnya baru akan keluar. Importnya ini kita simpan dulu supaya cepat displaynya. They asking, we already upload for, but we show only one layer. Yeah, because we imported this is question solving. Yeah.
Okay. So you uploaded multiple files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you import only one, yeah.
Yeah,
you
here.
import. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, these are just other files that I have from the network part. Yeah, but for this tutorial, we just need the boundary. Yeah, and these are old files, projects that I've done. So you can see in this example, I was doing mapping for 6 landscapes in sub-Saharan Africa, so I have a boundary for each, for example. This is also why it's very useful to create folders, so that you can clearly see what's.
Ya, bagi yang tidak muncul, ternyata begitu diimport, dia akan memberikan nama file otomatis ya. Nah, itu yang harus di rename sesuai nama variabel Rgb.
Itu kan ada nama Rgb di atas.
The variable name should be Rgb. When you first import, it is different name. Ya.
Begitu import namanya tabel.
Ya, so you have to rename it.
Yes.
All you have to do
is click and then you can rename to whatever you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
You already thought.
How's it looking? I'll do a quick loop around, see how it's going. When it works for you, don't forget to save. So save the script. Yeah, save. And then we're already ready for tutorial 5. So you're over halfway there. For those online, I hope that if you tried with your own file, that you were successful. Just make sure that you change the name to something that fits. So if your shapefile is per Palu, then you can change the variable name here, ROI to Palu, and you can change the variable name here also to Palu. Make sure it's the same. Yeah. And also for anyone else in the room, if you tried with a different file, just change those 2 parts. Just make sure it's the same. One other important part, if you try with another shapefile and it's located in a different place, you also will have to change map set center so that it's centered on this new file, wherever it is. So if you're in Africa now, you can use your inspector tool to find out what the coordinates are. And then you would change this as well. Yeah. Next. Okay. So make sure you save. We're going to save again. And go to scripts. We're ready for tutorial 4. Okay. Move it a little bit. So yeah, for those waiting, you can try with another file if you have another
New tutorial.
Yeah. I'll just repeat one more time. If you want to try to run a different file, you will use the same process. So to upload the asset, you also will go to the Assets tab. You'll click New, then click Shapefile. Remember only to include the allowed file types when you upload, and check the asset name. So we can only have shapefile, zip file, DBF, PRJ, and the list goes on, but it's here. So for us, we just could not upload the SHX file, but all the rest. Yeah. So this is how we upload an asset. You select all, check the name, check the folder, drag it into the right folder if it's not there, and click upload. Then, when you go to your script and you want to add an asset, remember you just use this arrow. So, when you import, it comes there with the standard name, just table. Table doesn't really tell us something specific about that file, so it's better to change the name to something more descriptive. So this is how we change it to Laura Lindu, because that's what the file is. If you have a file of Palu, change to Palu. Yeah. And then just make sure that the variable name in the imports matches line 12, wherever you want to import that variable. Okay. If you want to try this for a different part of the world, just remember that that's what you have to do for the variables. And you might also have to change the coordinates if this is in a different part of the world. Okay. So, remove that. Okay. Yeah, you can also do this. There's also a way, instead of map set center as a coordinate, you can also put it as the center of the file. So yeah, that's just a little bit of coding. If you're an advanced user and want to already try that, you can also try that. Okay, let's go to tutorial 4.
Okay.
Okay, on to the next one. Now this fast. Okay, so to make a new script, we know the drill. Make sure you're in the script tab. New file. Change the name. Tutorial 4. And repeat. Now, tutorial 4 is going to be quite easy because it's just a combination of tutorial 2 plus tutorial 3. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Oh, I have to make another one. So, I forgot to change my path. So the file that I created was in the wrong folder. So just watch out for that. Okay. My text file. It's also not too long. And paste it. Okay. Now what we're going to do, I can show a little preview. Now we're going to crop the elevation data that we used before to the part boundary and to a buffer of the part boundary. And this is also where those joining online, if you didn't add the asset, you can still keep up with that. Because we're going to use another feature of Google Earth Engine where you don't have to upload a file, but you can create one yourself. Okay. Okay, so you can take the slash and the asterisk from line 5, and let's put it to line 17. And you can see the first comment on line 6 says, remember back to the elevation data from tutorial 2? We're now going to crop this data to our study site. So if we run this code as it is, you should be very familiar with what comes out already. But if you see, I also included this line false. So to see the image, you again have to go to the layers and check, and then you will see. Okay. Now, if we're good up to this point, we can move the slash and the asterisk down to line 25. When we're ready, just move the asterisk and the star to 25. Okay. So, if you look at the extra, I'll say this quickly for those online. For those joining online, if you typed in and had everything from tutorial 2 running, you can just copy the first lines of the code from tutorial 2 into this layer. And then you can run this and stay with us instead of having to type it all again. I hope it's okay. For those in the room, if you look at 19 and 20, you can see what we're doing, right? So again, we have this var ROI equals Laura Lindu. We want that Laura Lindu is our asset, but in this script, we have to import it again. So to do that, go to your asset tab, and we have to just put it into this new script. It's a new script, so we have to re-add this file. So go to your assets, find this boundary, and then again click on the arrow. Remember, it comes in as table. So let's change that to Lore. Then once more. When you do that, this should go from black to purple.
Ya, kalau filenya sudah matching, pasti berubah.
Yeah. When it matches and you spelled it correctly, both will be purple.
Dari hitam akan pasti menjadi ungu.
Right. So now we have created a variable called ROI. And what we want to do is we want to take this map that right now covers the whole world. If you zoom out, you would see this covers the whole world. And we want to flip it to just that shape file that we had, the one that we uploaded in the last tutorial. We do that with this other very important function that if you use Google Earth Engine, you'll use a lot, and it's clip. So we take test image, which is our image here, and we set a new variable. So our new variable called crop to Lore Lindu is equal to the test image, so this one, that's your test image, dot flip ROI. That's it, and that's how you do it. Yeah, dot flip.
Ya, sama seperti di update. Cuma fungsinya di sini menggunakan ya fungsi kita clip tadi. Image clip. Test image clip.
Test image dot flip. Okay. And in this case, if you have a different variable name, if you use AOI or if you use image or whatever you use for this, put that inside the clip. Now, when we go to add the layer, we just copy paste the exact same information for this whole map. And now, instead of having test image that we add, now we add the new variable crop to our label. And we can run. Let's see what happens.
Ya, tapi kita akan menggunakan. Jadi setelah menggunakan crop,
this is an amazing book. They are all
Okay. So, sounds like it worked for the majority of you. For all of you. This is great. And now, we're going to give another option. So, let's say that you do this work, right? You get this elevation for Laura Lindu National Park, but you want to know what's happening around the park. You want to know what's happening in the middle, in the enclaves. There's a really nice way to do this, to add a new file that has everything that you want, and that's with these icons that you see here in the top left of the map. I haven't explained these yet, but it's ways to add and create files directly in Google Earth.
jadi bisa
So,
memulai langsung ya.
you can try to add any of these. I'll start with the marker. So we can add a point in the center of the lake here. When you add this, it shows up as a geometry. And with these options, you can edit the properties. So what I did, I clicked the second icon here, add a marker. I clicked onto the map, anywhere in the map, and then I go to my geometry imports. Okay. If you click edit layer properties, here's what you see. You can change the name, you can change the color, you can even change what type of file it is, geometry, feature collection. I won't go into details about the differences between those at this stage, but there's a lot of documentation online about what it implies with those different types. Okay. So that's how to make geometry. But that's a point. If we click to a point, we're going to get nothing. So we need a file. We need a shape. So I'm going to get out of there. And now I'm going to go to this icon. It's the fourth icon. And when you hover over, it says draw a shape. So I'll first say, make sure that you move this code editor up so that you have access to this area. And then we're ready to draw. So when you click draw a shape, now we click around on the map, and when you come back to the first point, you've created a shape. I'll show. So I'll click here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many you want. And when you go back to the original, which is here, boom, we have a shape. Yeah. So now we have a new polygon that we can also use to click or to run code and run analysis. Okay. So one important point that we can see here is if we go to this geometry. Right now I have 1 point and I have 1 polygon. This is not what we want because we have 2 different types for 1 geometry. So we have a few options that we can do. We can go to the first icon, which is how you stop drawing. And now we can click on the different parts. If you click on the point, if you did make a point, now I can drag it around. I can put it to locate. I can also edit it if I want to.
Ya, jadi bisa posisinya itu bisa diedit ya. Jadi ini kan kemampuannya juga sama dengan Qgis, Qgis itu membuat titik, poligon, dan garis. Nah, tadi kan ini baru tadi titik dan poligon. Nah, kalau mau mengedit posisinya, ya bisa menggunakan edit itu yang paling kiri. Ya.
Okay, so I will delete the point. And now you see the geometry just says 1 poly, which is the polygon that we want.
Jadi tadi kan dihapus ya, sehingga yang tersisa hanya poligon. Poin tadi dihapus.
And now we have a buffer to the national park. So I'm going to rename this file to Lindu buffer.
Jadi ini yang disebut dengan buffer, tapi buffernya manual ya.
And it's important, please rename the same, because we will use this in the code in a second. So when you type in the name, you correct the name. Should be Lore, capital L, Lindu, capital L, Buffer, capital B.
Jadi seperti itulah, pakai huruf kapital ya, L-nya pakai huruf besar, L-nya juga lindunya dari besar dan buffer.
Then press OK. Just as with the layers, you can choose to display or remove the buffer. I'm going to take it out. Okay. Now let's take the slash asterisk and move it all the way to the bottom, because we're about ready to finish this tutorial.
Pindahkan lagi ke tanda aspeknya.
Now we can already compare line 29 with line 20. So in line 20, we take our original image, test image, and we put it to the ROI, which is a variable. In this case, we take the same code, but instead of ROI, the variable, we put Lore Lindu buffer. So what did we just create? Make sure that the names and the spelling and the capitalization is the same between this and this. And click run.
Ya, kita sekarang mengklik menggunakan buffer tadi. Ya, kita mengklik image yang pertama kali. Nah, makanya sekarang jadi lebih besar. Ya, jadi ini tujuannya supaya pada saat study itu tidak hanya di batas saja kan. Jadi kalau supaya ada di luar batas sedikit, kita gunakan yang file.
Great. So at this stage, you probably don't have an exact replica of what I have here, because you probably drew your buffer a little bit differently than I did, but you should have something quite similar. Okay, that's the end of tutorial 4. Don't forget to save.
Jangan lupa menyimpan.
Okay. Now we're getting to tutorial 5, which is quite a bit more advanced than what we've done up to this point. So brace yourself. For those joining online, it might be a lot to type. So I would suggest just following along. And yeah, if you would like, you can email me, and I would be happy to share the script with you, and you can try this out later.
Ya, berikutnya akan menjelaskan yang lebih advance.
I'm creating a new file for tutorial 5. I'm putting it in the correct path this time. I'm copying the text. And adding it in. Okay. So this script was developed by Lutz, by myself, and by another student in our department in Germany who is from Indonesia.
Jadi ini apa namanya script ini lumayan kompetitif, makanya dikoding bersama. Jadi
Exactly. Okay, let's start off by taking the slash asterisk and let's add it to line 50.
50.
Now, we get a little bit of repetition, which is great for learning, but we have to put the boundaries that we created again in. So we should all remember now, it should be quite fast. Go to the assets, find your boundary file, add it in, and name it Lorlindu.
Ya, jangan lupa import. Pertama kali import ya. File.
And same with the buffer. So this time, instead of adding a buffer as a polygon or as a shape, I'm going to add it as a rectangle. So with this, you click once in the corner, and then you can drag and create whatever shape, whatever dimensions of a rectangle that you like. So now we have that.
Ini membuat empat ya.
Yes, and also rename this Lorlindu buffer. So we do that by hovering here, clicking to edit the layer properties of the geometry, and rename. Lorlindu buffer. If you did it correctly, lines 10 and 11 should be purple. So yeah, Lorlindu for the asset that we uploaded, and Lorlindu buffer for the geometry that we just drew. Right? I'll just repeat for those who might still be in the middle. So we are repeating the process of adding an asset. To add an asset, go to the Assets tab, find the file you want, and click the arrow, and rename. To add a geometry, click Draw a Rectangle, or Draw a Shape, and click to create that file. To change the name, you go to your geometry imports, edit layer properties, and then change the name. Okay. Then remember, you can always go to this hand icon to stop drawing. This is also important, because then you can go back to dragging. So after you create a geometry, always go back to this hand. Okay. Now, if we go further to line 14, you can see I'll give a quick explanation for line 14, and I can repeat if we need another explanation. So if you remember with the previous scripts, we had map.setCenter, and then we had to type the coordinates. We had to type 120 point whatever, and -1 point whatever. Then we also had to set the zoom. Now we're using a different function to center the map. And this is map.centerObject. And inside we have the RY. So now when we run this script, instead of going to a particular coordinate that we specify, it's going to center itself to the center of that file. So this is really great. Hello? This is great for anyone who uploaded your own file instead of the part boundary and you want to try something else. Now it will automatically center to that file. Okay, so let's click run, see what happens. Yeah, and we get centered right on the file. Not much change. So as I mentioned in the session in the morning, I mentioned a data set called Sentinel 2 and how important this data set is. So this is a satellite program that was launched over 7 years ago, and it has been continuously taking data from the Earth's surface for several years. All of this data is available in Google Earth Engine in the data catalog. So we can use it to see our study site. So now we can take the /* and we can move it to line 35. Okay. So now let's go back to line 16, and I'll describe one by one what we're specifying here. Just a quick reminder, this is the most challenging tutorial of today, so if you're a bit lost, don't worry, we'll get through it, we'll go slow. Okay. On line 16, we define a variable called cloud. We set the variable equal to 40. Now, one feature of the Sentinel data, Sentinel satellites, is that they are going around the Earth and they are collecting information about the electromagnetic radiation that is hitting the Earth's surface and coming back to the sensors. Now, sometimes it doesn't get all the way to the ground. Sometimes it hits a cloud, bounces off, and no information is received about the forest below, or the agriculture fields below, or the buildings below. It's just nothing. It's just white noise. But this data set that we're about to load has a way to filter this information out. And that's exactly what this variable is for. So here we specify cloud equals 40 to say that if we have within our image, within this date range that we're going to specify later, 40% cloud cover for what we're looking at, it will filter that data out. It will not consider that data.
Bisa dipahami? Jadi kita sekarang baru akan akan membuat namanya variabel namanya cloud, awan. Jadi tujuannya nanti sesungguhnya adalah mencari infra yang bebas awan. Ya, ini apa namanya ditetapkan 40. Ya, jadi nanti infra yang cloudnya yang awannya 40 ke atas itu akan dilakukan. Ya, tujuannya. Jadi tujuannya spesifikasi 40 itu misalnya 40 ke atas Right. The question is how do you define 40% up?
Yeah, this comes a little bit from experience and also from testing. So when we ran the elevation data, we knew from our background knowledge and on the maximum elevation of the park what a nice value would be. We said 0 to 2,500. It's a very similar process here. So typical values range from 20% to 40% or 50%. So as a geospatial scientist, you'll have this in your mind, and then it can be a lot of testing, trial and error. Change the numbers, see if it looks better. If it looks better, go with it. If it looks worse, go back or try something new.
The problem is you always have clouds here. Always clouds.
Yeah.
So if you set it to 0, you will get no image. So you need to accept a certain amount of clouds in the area, otherwise you get no data.
And just to give a preview of what we're going to get at the end of this tutorial, we're going to get this. So we're going to get filtered, cloud-free satellite images for the park, and then we're also going to overlay the park boundary. So that's where we're headed, so that it makes sense to all of you.
Ya, the maximum value.
This is the maximum value.
Jadi maksimum bahwa dia diizinkan untuk kita orang.
Okay, so to create this image, we have to go back and we have to specify all of these pieces. So we specify the cloud cover, and now we can also specify when we want this information from. So what year? In this case, we're typing in 2021.
Yang kedua, membuat variabel tahun yang kita sebut dengan year. Jadi untuk memanggil data-data yang mulai dari tahun itu. Jadi kalau misalnya adik-adik ingin yang tahun 90, mulai misalnya untuk monitoring, yang boleh tahun 90, tapi ini tahun pakai tahun 2000,
This number also comes a bit from experience. So it's important to know how far back the data goes. And remember from our search function, you can always get more information. So you can see later that we use this Sentinel to SR harmonize. If you want more information, you can copy this into the search, and it will tell you how far back the data goes. So let's go ahead and do that. In line 34, you can copy Copernicus all the way up to harmonize. Copy. Paste into this search function above. And now you see that 2 popped up. Let's click this first one. Okay, so just like when we did this before, we have a description, very detailed description with links that give you more information where you can learn everything that you want to about this data set. But one part that I'm going to draw your attention to is here. Data set availability. Okay? So what this information is telling us is that this data set goes all the way back to 2017, and we can even see the month, so the month and the day. So March 28th, 2017. So for those of you who want to test out already, trying different parameters, and you want to check the data for 2018 or 2019, the year you can change. You can try 2020. You cannot try 2010 because the data now we know only goes to 2017.
Jadi kalau terkena mulai dari 2011 ya. Jadi kalau 2010.
Yeah, so for those of you who already want to you start running the code, you can test this, type different numbers, and see what changes you get. Okay, the next information that we have to specify is the start and the end. I mentioned before the break in the morning session that one of the large benefits of Google Earth Engine is that you can run information, you can run models, you can run classifiers, not just on one date, but on a range. So this is exactly what we're doing with this line of code. Instead of searching for one image, we take a start date, we take an end date, and then later you're going to see that we're going to use that information, everything in between. All the data that exists in between, we'll use. In this case, we start with January 1st. So we want to take all satellite images from 2021. That means we start with January 1st, and we end with December 31st.
Jadi ini maksudnya gini, ya, itu kan ada variabel start, ya, ada variabel end. Jadi di dalam kurungnya itu ada year plus, ya, itu nanti pada saat jadinya akan jadi nomor di startnya itu akan ada terjadi 20210101. Kemudian M-nya 2021 strip 12 titik, artinya kita akan mencari data dari Januari sampai Desember. Ya, oke.
So what we are trying to do here with this mosaic is to get a cloud-free image. And for this we need to look for cloud-free pixels in many images and combine them to one image at the end. And do you know how many times an image is taken from Sentinel? An idea? The revisiting time of Sentinel is every 6 days. Every 6 days we get a new image. And the outline of the study area that you see here in green is quite huge. So every single image that we look at will have more than 1.5 gigabytes. And it's hundreds of images. So this is something that you can never do on your own computer. Because we are now analyzing terabytes of data. So the Google Earth Engine is now looking up a whole pile of all the images and combines only the cloud-free pixels.
Hey, you're almost ready to run, so stay with me. So with these 4 variables, which are very important, we're able to run the code. But there's a little bit of processing that happens in between. Now, what you see from lines 21 to lines 31, we've called the cloud masking function. And to use this function, you don't really have to understand what's written there exactly. And this line of code that is here was also not written from scratch by me, by Edwin, or by Lutz. A huge way of using Google Earth Engine is knowing how to take lines of code that are already written and how to use them. So that's exactly what we're doing here. So I mentioned, when these satellites go around, they scan the Earth. And if there's a cloud, it's going to come back to cloud. But very smart people, smarter than me, way smarter than me, have written functions on how to remove that, how to cut it out. And we're using that information here. So we just need to know that it exists. We need to know that it takes this number 40 that we specified and it uses that number, and it cuts out the data that we don't want and just leaves us with what we do want. So that's the cloud masking function. Now, on line 34, we load the data. Very simple. Now, previously we used ec.image to get the elevation data. Now we add EE.image collection. It's a small change, and the Google Earth Engine documents explain these different variables, but again, a lot of using Google Earth Engine is just modifying what's already there. So it's there. We're ready to move the slash asterisk from line 35. And let's add it to line 50. Now it's slowly all coming together. In this section, we create two new variables. The first is called S2 ROI, and the second is called S2 buffer. So now we're taking this data, just like the elevation data. Previously, it covered the whole world, and we clipped it to our study site and to the buffer. This is exactly what we're doing here. So you see, we take this Sentinel-2 data, the variable that we created above, and we clip it. But we also clip the date, we filter for the clouds, and we map to remove the clouds. Okay. It's a little bit complicated, but it works.
Bisa dipahami ya. Jangan kaget lah gitu ya. Jadi fungsi tadi memang sudah dibuatkan. Jadi memang kita ditulis oleh beliau-beliau ini, tapi memang sudah disiapkan oleh dosen ini. Ya. Jadi ya yang di belakangnya itu kita buat. Tapi ini sudah disiapkan. Ya, namanya ya buat satu.
Okay, so let's keep going and let's look at a map. I think it's ready for us to run the code. So let's take out the slash and the asterisk and add it to line 59. And go ahead and click run. If you have your buffer on, like I do, you can remove it. And then you can see the satellite image. So we now have a cloud-free satellite image for 2021 for our study site and for our buffer. Remember, if you go to the layers, you can pick which one you want to show. So you can show the buffer, you can show the clip to the study site. There you go.
Ya, ini hasilnya ya. Jadi dari tahun kita tahun 2021 dari bulan Januari ya, Desember, inilah hasil dari coding ini. Jadi kita mendapatkan yang benar-benar pengeranya bebas awan.
I hope that we're all on the same page. I'll just go back and explain a little bit of what happened there. So remember, going back to line 34, we added our data, right? We added the Sentinel-2 satellite data. In the lines that followed, we filtered that data from January 1st to December 31st. We filtered the clouds. We clipped to our study site, and we removed the clouds that were still remaining. In this next line, starting with 53, we took that information that was clipped to the Sulawesi National Park boundary. We took the median of all of the images and pixels that remained after filtering and clipping and removing clouds, and then we just added it to the map. Okay. Now, if we look back at the original data set, we open it up again, Next to the description, we have the bands. And for those of you who are familiar with this kind of geospatial processing, this will be very natural to you. You'll understand what this means. But essentially, here, we can see the different band options. So if you're familiar with ArcGIS and with displaying these kind of satellite images, you can try out an Rgb image. And to do that, you just have to change the bands. Since we're already a bit advanced, I'll let you try that at home. But effectively, that's what we're doing.
Jadi B11, B8 itu tadi B3 itu kan nama bandnya ya. Dari Sentinel.
What we can do is see which bands we're displaying now. So if you see here, we have bands B11, B8, B3. So when we look at the data set, and we go to the bands tab, B11 is near band, B8 is the near infrared band, and B3 is the green band.
Jadi
So,
band tadi band 11 namanya sphere atau infrared. Ya, kemudian yang B8 itu dia infrared. Ya, kemudian B3 itu green. Ya, di kasat mata itu kan red, green, blue. Ini yang greennya B3. Nah, jadi urutannya tadi B11, B8, B3 itu sesungguhnya urutannya Rgb. Ya, komposit itu menghasilkan warna green.
So we have a few small pieces left, which are easier, I promise. And so now we can take the slash asterisk from line 59 and move it to line 69. With these 10 lines of code, we are going to visualize the park boundary. So we created we specified, we pick color and the width, and run. And now, when it runs, you're also going to see in red the boundary of the park. So now, even though we have the buffer image as the satellite image, we still can see where the park is within that. Right. The final section of the code is to export this image. So for the geospatial analysts in the group, you might be aware how complicated or time-consuming or annoying it is to download Sentinel or Landsat data from online. You have to, it's a big mess. And then you get too much data, or you get separate images you have to glue together, and it's a headache. What you can do with Google Earth Engine, now that you have this script and it runs and it works, is you can automatically download this data that you have here. This is a more time-consuming process, so we won't actually run this, but you can see what happened. So the line that you would write is export.image.toDrive, and this will take the data that you want to download and put it into your Google Drive.
So even if this is very fast processing and very fast visualization on the screen, the amount of data is really very huge. So if you like to download them, be sure that your map file is not too big, because otherwise the file size is really huge.
But for those who are doing this kind of downloading of satellite imagery often, this is a huge shortcut to going to the Copernicus website finding this whole process. And that's it. You survived the most challenging tutorial. Okay, so I'll quickly show what happens if you try to run the export, which you also can do, but I just recommend not to. So here we are trying to export and again, once we click run, you can submit tasks. So in tutorial 3, we learned how to upload data. This is how we download data. So when you run the script, it won't automatically start downloading. You have to put this extra check. So if we were to download this data, you click run, you specify the name of the task.
But don't start the download.
Yeah, don't do it.
Ya, jadi gini maksudnya, ini adalah proses bagaimana menyimpan ya data yang sudah tadi cloud free, yang sudah bebas awan tadi, yang dari awal Januari 2021 sampai Desember, ya ke dalam apakah hard disk, apa Google Drive. Tapi jangan mencoba ini karena apa, ini sangat besar volumenya. Gitu ya. Ini kan karena latihan ya. Nah, jadi tidak rekomendasikan. Kalau tidak latihan sih
Paling sih screen aja tuh capture.
tidak lama, tapi nyimpan itu kan pasti juga. Nah, saya takutnya nanti space-nya sini habis.
Yeah. So this you are welcome to try later at home if you want to download and see where it goes or how it goes. But sometimes, yeah, so just look at the options that you have. So you set the scale. If you have a particular folder in your Google Drive, you can type that in. You can set the file name and the format.
Ya, saya lihat ya formatnya ada, nyimpannya di mana, sama lah ya. Tapi untuk latihan ini mungkin siapa ya hard disk yang memang kalau memang real untuk.
Yeah, so cloud storage or even an Earth Engine asset. There's a lot of options. Great. So this one was a lot. This one was really, a big step up from what we were doing before. But yeah, you all did great.
Many the data that we upload dari file, it is remain in our account privately or public.
It remains in your account.
Ya. Jadi data yang kita upload, Pak, itu nanti ada di akun kita sendiri, bukan public gitu. Jadi rahasia kita. Jadi kayak milik nyimpan kita file di Google Drive, Pak, gitu ya. Orang lain yang akses.
Please give a very warm applause to Mary.
No.
I think this was very useful and very informative. And we decided to have this training on the Google Earth Engine to make the whole training activity a little bit more sustainable. Because what you learn now, you can also use in 10 years or 5 years. Or you can also share it with other people or use it for other study areas. And this is much more sustainable than producing something on your own computer. So it took a little bit longer than we expected, but I think it was important. And actually, at the beginning, the plan was that there is another very long session for training on Qgis, but we are already entering the afternoon, so I will I will keep this part very short. And now the question is, do you need a break before we go to the next part?
Maybe break.
Yeah.
5 minutes maybe.
Maybe 10 minutes break.
10 minutes.
Yeah, and then we come back, and then I keep it quite short. Yeah, okay. So 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Perry.
I'm sorry, I spoke to the gun. I also said, that's it. Oh, very sorry, very no, it sounds like
Yeah.
Uh,
I can also just
so they don't need to. Okay. So then when I start, I'm very sorry. Very nice. I mean, this presentation is not so. But as an example, yeah, Mary will talk about this because
tutorial 6. Yeah, so this one will mostly be by yourself. So this is actually running mouse that already exists. So there's actually a few global maps that we create. And it's really useful to know because making a classified map, it's a long process. Right? It's a really long process. I've done it like for a lot of freelancers and it's really annoying to make your own classification and have it be worse than this, you know? And this happened in one of the cases, there was a really difficult entity to classify. I tried and still these automatic, like global maps were better. You know, it's awkward. So knowing that these global maps exist, knowing where to find them, how to run them, is really useful. And then if you look in the map already classified, you don't have to make just use it.
Kalau menggunakan ekspor saja, kalau kalau mau otomatis kan 15 gitu ya, pakai baru nanti di lapangan ini apa sih? Gimana pun ini sesungguhnya fokus ini
Ya. Coba dilihat anunya dulu.
saya dari YouTube itu link dari
Bisa dibuka di situ.
sampai jam 16 itu bicara tentang bagaimana belajar di tas.
Saya nggak mau.
Oh ya dari saya.
Nanti ada warna biru.
Ya,
Ada anunya yang selainnya warna
nanti saya kasih.
warna biru.
Minum kopi dulu.
Iya, break. Ayo, ada kopi. Kopi break. Harus. Ada juga kopi after break. Ya, oke.
How many? Many kilo?
Ini ada tadi ya. Indonesia. Good dong. Yeah.
Then I gotta learn new stuff myself.
Yeah, that's important. Let's get together those ones. Then you make specification, time series, and change. Also for three great big ones to do the project and changes.
Yeah, that's right. Check with the necessary to us. Yeah.
We can see it.
So for with the person, no, because nobody can ask for it. I'm sure they know more changes in that also. Around the field. So many. Yeah, I plan to divide the range up.
Maybe she in this week.
Yeah.
Really nice examples of
bold side bold.
What I didn't know was that here, you just go to the data catalog and just drop.
So the exporting data can be further analyzed by Qgis. Dari mulai kelas 1 aja.
It was funny, I was like writing the script tutorial on the drive.
You did also during your master thesis, right?
So the tutorials, no. I was using ice cream. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the geometry imports, like these light functions, this is my training data. And when you do that, you have to add it. Now there's geometry that is feature collection. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated. Yeah. It could be like, yeah, I could see this going to, yeah, tutorial 8, like you said, tutorial 9. And yeah,
Ini kan sekarang kita lihat itu kan ya itu kan ada ini misalnya bijinya posisinya semua gitu ya. Nah misalnya gini di kerannya ini ada yang satu ketiga sorry tiga.
try to make it nice, increase the accuracy, and you take something over that. Still, it's not that
Kita lihat ya. Ya, itu ya. Kalau kita ada soal ini kan ilmu sharing ini ada stream akses software
And from your own account, you can also share scripts with other accounts. Yeah, but the river is very variable. I already saw it.
My research, location. My research location.
Karena dia ini kompetitifnya selain
Remember me when I studied in Netherlands, my program is partial planning, deal with GIS and set, but I did not do their and just the time I think Google GA is not exist yet.
No, it's not.
Ya, kita akan mulai lagi ya.
So the last session for today, and before I take over, I realized that I interrupted Mary because there was also a tutorial 6, but we will not do the tutorial 6 now, but Mary will explain what it does. And this is also an outlook to future workshops, because we will proceed with these activities.
Jadi Mary akan memperlihatkan secara demonstrasi saja, ya, mungkin biar singkat. Nanti Bapak Ibu lihat seperti apa bedanya dari yang ke-6 ini ya. Nanti berikutnya akan.
Great. So thank you so much for your attention. This is the sort of wrap up that I have for all of my sessions, and then just explaining how you would use tutorials. So I'm going to go quickly to the tutorial outline, right? So we accomplished a lot today. We learned how to run simple scripts and how to code. We learned how to create a simple map of elevation, how to upload and visualize data, and then how to prop that map to a region of interest. Tutorial 5 was a huge leap in your geospatial analyst career because then you went to deriving cloud-free central to mosaics. It's much advanced, but you guys did great. And now you have this code and you can modify it and you can run it for different parts of the world, and the possibilities are endless already with what you know how to do. If you look on the list, there's also tutorial 6. And this is examining global land cover maps. Now, the skills that you have today and how quickly you were able to pick up this information, you have all of the skills necessary to run tutorial 6 by yourself. You have the script, you have the data, and now you have the knowledge on how to do it. I already have it uploaded here. So we won't go through the process of making a new script, copying, pasting, adding an asset, and creating a buffer. But what you can see here is that I've already done that. So when you paste in tutorial 6, add your files, add your data, and click run, this is what you get. Now what we're seeing here are 2 classified maps that exist for the entire Earth. So I think, yes, let me show you. One of the tabs in the layers is the global map. So if I zoom out, you can see that some groups of very intelligent scientists have created maps for the entire Earth. Many of you might have had a course or learned about how to create a classified map, and you know that it's a long process. Supervised classification, you have to collect training data, select your classifier, find good training data and good satellite images, a very long process. And sometimes you create a map for an area of interest, and no matter how much training data and how much you try to improve your model, it still won't be better than these global maps because they're created by very advanced teams and with very high quality data. So as a geospatial analyst, as you go forward into your career, this is your career, it's also so important to keep up to date with the latest data, the latest open source, global, regional data. And so this tutorial 6 shows you 2 examples of those. We have the ESA 2020 World Cover, Global Land Cover, and we have the Copernicus Global Land Cover for 2016. You can read about those online if you want more information, but just know that with what you learned today, you can see these maps. You can zoom in, you can see if you like it, you can see if it makes sense for your study site. You can compare them, and you can try to make your own map and see how it looks. Okay. So, one final note is that this is the longest script of them all. It has a staggering 223 lines of code. It's a lot. Most, don't panic, don't be afraid because you're capable of understanding it all. I just want to say the majority of this code and the reason that it's so long is the parts of the code that create these legends on the side. Here and here. And if you remember, one of the limitations that I mentioned of Google Earth Engine is doing a final map display. And this kind of shows you why. So it takes hundreds of lines of code to create a map that you might be comfortable outputting, but still it's missing a lot of very important information. So with that, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I'm so impressed with how quickly you all picked up this information. And yeah, I have all the confidence in the world that you're going to take it, you're going to modify it, you're going to make it your own, and you're going to do better things than I'll ever do with your attention. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. And I hope that this group, maybe also other people in the FP3 project, will become a community and we can constantly update each other. Or we can also use the next workshops to extend this and to update the codes, make it larger and larger, so that at the end we have a very nice project outcome also for the FP3. Because there are so many more things that we can do with the Google Earth Engine, like for example, classification, run classification algorithms with own training data from the region. So many different interesting things that we can do with this. Okay, so actually I was not prepared that Mary is so. Okay. You will stop Zoom now?
Just fine.
Just fine. Okay. So I was not aware that Mary's part is a little bit longer than I expected, and that's why my contribution will now be only very short.
I think it was connected to Zoom.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce Lutz's session while he's getting connected. So we spent all of the time thus far today learning about Google Earth Engine, and this is sort of the new and flashy way to do geospatial analysis. We've already learned about some of the limitations, which is in final map output, But there are also other limitations, or at least alternative ways to do this. And
Online.
yeah, and many of you have used ArcGIS, and now we're going to use QGIS. So hopefully you also have this downloaded. A major benefit of QGIS in comparison to ArcGIS is that it's free. It's free, open access, so you don't have to buy a license or find an illegal license to use it. You can just use it. Yeah, so there are also many resources and a lot of work that Lutz has done with QGIS to also provide you information on the park and to show how this program can be run. What's also great about this program is that with QGIS, you don't need internet connection to run most of these. So with Google Earth Engine, if you're in the middle of the forest, you can't really run it unless if you have good internet connection. With QGIS, you can just run it, and there's also so much that you can do with it. So it's nice as a geospatial analyst to have both skills, right? So to know how to use the latest and greatest of Google Earth Engine, how to write scripts, how to do all of this. But don't forget the basics, right? Go back to doing it with a GIS program and doing it manually and learn what you like about both. So for my experience as a geospatial analyst, I always use both. So I have never done an entire project just using Google Earth Engine. I always do some amount of work also in QGIS. So that's a very valuable skill to have.
Ya. Jadi sekarang akan dilanjutkan oleh Dr. Lutz ya untuk memperkenalkan Qgis. Ini open access software, jadi gratis, software gratis yang setara dengan Qgis ya. Kalau Qgis kan bisa jutaan itu kalau beli, kalau ini gratis. Ya. Dan ya mereka membuktikan ini cukup powerful juga.
Can I ask you something?
Where do you get the map of Lurlemo National Park? Because the map is different that we have. For example, in Reso Tuareg, this is very different because can you see in my maps? This is different. But so far, the training overall is good, very good, especially for me, staff in Lurlemo National Park. Thank you.
Data from sudah perhap outdated perhap ya. Jadi mereka memang belum memperoleh yang akan official. Makanya kemarin kita diskusikan kan, jangan sampai nanti yang kita gunakan ya itu beda dengan ini kan. Jadi kalau kita analisis deforestasi data yang benarnya mungkin hanya 10.000, ini masih 50.000, wah kan bisa merugikan kita ya. Makanya kemarin kita bicara di bawah pokok ini bagaimana masalah data sekali proyek nanti ya. Agar memperoleh data yang tapi untuk exercise harus
The problem was when we started with our activities in Output 4. We were asking for some geodata from the national park. And the problem was they have not submitted any geodata. So we needed to find some data.
Yeah.
Because we have no access to other data. So this is the only outline we have.
Yeah.
And this is at the moment the problem. Because we know there is a one map policy in Indonesia, but it's difficult to get this map.
Okay, I think this is just for exercise. Later on, we have agreement for the national park.
Just for exercise, yes. Okay, so now we are entering the last part, and this last part will not be interactive, even if there is a whole concept and also some tutorials. We will not have the time to do these tutorials now. On the USB drive that you copied on your computer, I also provided software. So on this USB drive, you also find installation for Qgis. Maybe some of you already installed this to switch to open source software at that point, because the licenses are really very expensive. And even if it is free for the students during the lectures, if they like to use it later, they have no chance to get the license because it's several thousand euros, several millions of rupees. And already 15 years ago, we switched to Qgis, which is open source software. I'm just starting this software here. You don't need to start it also on your own computer. And I remember when we did that 10, 12 years ago, this Qgis was not so powerful as ArcGIS. So it was working, but if you like to produce a nice map, it was still quite difficult to do. It was not so nice and not so easy. But over the last years, there was a very rapid development. And I would say that many things today are easier and even better in Qgis than in ArcGIS. And me personally, at the beginning, I used both. Sometimes I find things easier in Qgis, and other things I still remember from ArcGIS, and it was easier to use ArcGIS. But for the last 10 years, I think I have not used ArcGIS anymore. So I don't know anything about ArcGIS. So if you are not familiar to Qgis, but if you used ArcGIS before, I think you can already imagine how the GIS system works. It is relatively loaded into your project. You have a map window here. You can start with an empty map. And then you have a lot of tools here, and this is only a small part of the tools that are available. If you started for the first time in the current version, there are new versions every some months. In the current version, you also have this information about the war in Ukraine. So QGIS for peace, you know that there is an ongoing war in Ukraine at the moment in Europe, which is quite uncommon and unexpected. So, to show some things, let's start project. There's nothing. Live is a short script. There is a short tutorial here that you find there, and we have no time to go through it. But maybe later at home or in the next go through this tutorial by your own. I think most of this is not so difficult for you to do. So what I want to load now is maybe just some basic data, just to show you how it looks like. And you don't need to do it on your own computer. So we have some prepared vector data and some raster data. Also here we have the boundary of the national park, where we know now it's not the correct one, just for training. And if we note this boundary, it looks very similar to ArcGIS, or the vector shapefile with the outline here. And also very similar to ArcGIS, you can style it in any form you like. Also later, the map outputs can be styled exactly in the same way like in ArcGIS, so you will not see any difference. At the moment, it's a polygon that is filled. And just to make it easier later, I just changed the style and make just the outline, just to make it more easy. So here we have our outline of the Lindo. What I also prepared for you, and that is also on the USB drives, is relatively high resolution digital elevation model. The elevation model we have used now in the Google Earth engine was the free open source data set from NASA, the SRTM, the Shuttle Radar Topographic Mission, is already a little bit older. It has a resolution of 90 meters, so it's relatively coarse. It is resampled to 30 meters, but the original resolution is 90 meters. And if you work here in Sulawesi, in the national park, you know that you have a very variable terrain. So a lot of steep slopes, a lot of peaks, and therefore it is also important to use a higher resolution elevation model. And what you find on the sticks is what you maybe know already, because it comes from Indonesia, is the official DEMNAS elevation model, which comes in a very high resolution of 8.3 meters. This elevation model comes in very many single tiles, which makes it a little bit difficult to use it. So many small tiles that we need to put together, and for this purpose we can create a virtual data set that compiles all these different tiles into one. And I will do this here on my computer. There is no need to follow me. I will just try to do it for you. And at this point, this is interesting also for you. If you go to the processing menu here, so if you go to processing and toolbox, then you see here on the right hand side the toolbox that contains all the different tools and algorithms that you can use here in QGIS. It also includes a lot of GDAL algorithms that are also implemented here, and also Qgis and Saga, which are two other GIS softwares that are included in this one. And the tools you see up here with the buttons, they are all part of this toolbox, so you all find them also there. So, and what I do now, just as for a demonstration purpose, I just create the virtual raster file from all the single elevation files that we have in this DEMNAS model. And the tool that we use for that is called virtual raster. So build a virtual raster file. And this is what I will now do for you. For this, I just need to select the directory where I find all the different original DEM files, and this is the location here also on the USB drive. So DEMNAS Indonesian official DEM, and there you find all the different files. If I run this algorithm, it takes a while then it combines all the different layers to one digital animation model, which looks like this. Maybe it looks familiar to you because if you don't zoom in, it looks very similar to what Mary showed us before, only that we see different colors in it. So this is Palu here, and this is the national park. The only difference now is that we have a much higher resolution. Very similar also to ArcGIS, the ordering of the layers here in the menu, in the layer pane, determines which one is on top and which one is below. So if we like to see the boundary on top, we need to drag this down here. And then we have the boundary on top. So now we have a very high resolution elevation model. With such an elevation model, you can already derive a lot of very interesting products. Products that are also interesting for your daily work. For example, we can do some watershed analysis. I have prepared some tutorials, some trainings in this script for you that you can try out. So it would, for example, be possible to identify all the rivers in the national park, or let's say all the lowest points in the elevation model where the river should be. Let's say like this. So all these different products are described, and they are also already on the USB stick. Maybe one thing that we can do now is just make it a little bit nicer. So we can just have a little bit nicer visual look of this one. And for this purpose, I duplicate the layer and change the properties of the lower one. Shape. And the other one is so all this is described in the original also. Okay. So you find all the products and the files also on the USB folder, and you can also use them for your own work. What we will not do now, because we don't have enough time for that, is to do all the watershed analysis. But what you can try out at home, maybe also with your own data, the very typical instruments that you usually use in the GIS system. So we have a lot of raster tools allowing different kinds of raster analysis, also classifications. There is a very powerful raster calculator that you can use, for example, to calculate products out of raster images like calculating the NDVI. You have learned how you can also do it with the Google Earth engine, but you can also do it here. And you can do all the other things that you did in ArcGIS before. And the same also with the vector tools. Also here you have all the geometry tools and all the tools you need to work with vector data. What I also did is I downloaded some of the products that Mary showed to us in the Google Earth engine, and that we have not downloaded now because it takes much too long time. But what I did is I downloaded the Sentinel Composites that Mary produced in the Google Earth engine for 3 points in time. And this is maybe something that I can now also load here. So this is also in the folder geodata, raster data, Sentinel-2. And here you find 3 Sentinel-2 images, which are very big files. So each one of them is nearly 2 gigabytes. And I just go for 3 of them. Now we can have a look on what Mary produced before. You see that I cropped it to a rectangle like I also did, but I was very cautious that the rectangle does not get too big. So I only used the extent of the national park boundary to make it as small as possible. And already this size has 1.9 gigabyte. So be aware if you use the Google Earth engine and you draw a very large box, then it takes 1 day to download the image. Yeah, now it depends on your internet. It can be faster. If you have very fast internet, then it's okay. So now we see the images from 2019, 2020, and 2021. And if you zoom in a little bit, you see that okay, the settings of the color seems to be a little bit strange because everything is dark and blue. But you know it should be somehow green. So somehow we need to change the channels that we are here using for the red-green color. If you like to do that, you can just double-click on such an image in the layer pane, and then you get an interface where you can make exactly these settings. So here you can decide which bands to use for red, green, and blue. And you remember that in the Google Earth engine tutorial of Mary, she used a band combination where she used band 11 for red, 8, and 3. You apply this one, and then you see it looks very similar to what Mary did. And we know that it is not a natural color because the channels for red, green, and blue in Sentinel are not 11, 8, and 3. We are just using these channels. The original red, green, and blue channels are others. You can also set it to the original optical bands. So the red band in Sentinel is band number 4. The green band is band number 3. And the blue band is band number 2. So this would now be the natural color composition that we get if we use red, green, and blue colors. I now did this setting only for the 2019, but I can copy the style and use it also for the others. I will do this here. I can I can just copy this style and I can use the same style also here and also here. At the moment, I have only activated 2019. If I now also activate the others, we can look at the changes that occurred during this time period of 2 years, 3 years. It's not a very long time. But if we move from 2019 to 20, we see already some differences. And I'm not an expert. You need to decide whether this is encroachment or whether this is land management. I have no idea. The national park boundary, let me do it a little bit, make it more visible. The national park boundary. So this is the boundary of the national park. So everything that happens here is inside of the national park. You see there are changes from one year to the other. But I don't know whether this is critical for you or not. This is something that is your responsibility, not mine. And if we go on to 2021, probably there are more changes. But so if we now jump from 2019 to 2021, you see that there is a lot of dynamics in some areas of the national park. It is mainly here, south of the lake, but there are also other areas where you find a lot of activities and a lot of changes between the different years. Also here and in many other areas. So this is, let's say, a simple way of checking whether something happened or not. The more advanced way would be to make a time series analysis and try to identify all of these changes automatically. I'm wondering whether there was something more that there were a lot of questions from our side to the shapefiles we have, but now we know these are not the official shapefiles anyway. So we can forget about it. So I think there's not so much. Yeah, I can show you some of the outputs. So what I did for you, but you can redo it by your own, is that I derived so from the watershed analysis that I did with the digital elevation model, I identified the rivers, but probably you already have them. Only we don't have it. So what you see here would be the automatic delineation that takes some time to load of all the rivers and streams up from a certain site. And probably the national park already has all these rivers, I don't know. But if you are interested in that, or if you'd like to try this in another study area, you'll find the description how to do that also in the script. And what else do I have? What kind of programs? How to know this takes a little bit longer than that's too long. What I also did is from the terrain model a very simple analysis of slopes, because we learned that you also have or you had problems also with erosion and landslides. And it is mainly the steeper slopes that are affected, or the more sensible slopes, let's say. And from deriving a slope layer, we can quite easily get the slopes larger than a certain angle, for example. And I know from the Indonesian regulations, I think it is also part of your law, is that, for example, forest management is not allowed on slopes of more than 35%. But here we are not in a production forest, so it's different here. But what we can get is somehow a mask of all the very sensible slopes of more than 35%, which is quite a lot in this area. And if you compare this to the landslides that happened, you will probably see that it's more or less these slopes that were affected. I can just put Google in the background just to see whether we find some landslides here. And I have seen that mainly in this area there are a lot, I assume it's landslides, I don't know. What do you think what this is? Are these small landslides or international? Yeah. Yeah, because when I saw this, I was not sure whether it's gold mining or whether it's something else, but now I think it's probably landslides, or is there also gold mining in the national park?
Yeah, as also yesterday mentioned by Pak Yulianto.
Yeah.
There is a need to buy a landslide risk.
Yeah.
Because of the data like.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, when I checked this and I compared it to the slope angles, for some of them it's true, it's on the very steep slopes. Yeah. But sometimes there are also landslides on slopes which are not so steep. I don't know why. I cannot explain it. But you can derive a lot of more important and interesting products, and probably you already did for the national park using Qgis. But now you can also use Qgis if you are interested to try it out. And usually the Google Earth engine is very helpful to get you the basic products. But at the end, usually you also like to print a map. And in Indonesia, I know that you take a lot of care on the map layout, sometimes even more than on the data, unfortunately. But you always have a very fixed layout for the maps. And this is something that you cannot do with the Google Earth engine. So you need to do it in the GIS. Okay, one thing that is maybe also interesting for you is that there are a lot of very powerful plugins. So the basic version of Qgis can help you with a lot of things. But there are even many more plugins, because it is an open source community. You can get a lot of very interesting and very powerful plugins. So if you open the plugin manager, you have a very long list of very useful tools. I have not tried all of them, but some of them. And it's always good to check whether there is something useful for you. For example, the Google layer I have in the background here, this is also one of these plugins that I find very helpful. It's called the Quick Map Service, and it just provides you a lot of background, different background maps that you can use in your project. So we are using Qgis in teaching because it is so nice. The students are learning GIS and remote sensing using Qgis, and they can also use it later. So they have it, and they can use it for the whole lifetime. Not like with a commercial program. Okay. It doesn't make sense to start with any details because everything will take longer than 20 minutes, and there are only 20 minutes left for today because we decided to stop at 4 o'clock. And I would like to use the remaining 20 minutes to talk about two things. And first of all, before we came here, we were not really sure about the training needs that you have. At the very early stage in the collaboration, when we started our project activities about half a year ago, there was a request to UNTAD and also to the National Park about the training needs, because our plan was to do training. And they submitted a list with a lot of points where they think they need training. And this was the basis for us to develop these training sessions. But now I would be very much interested in whether we were successful or not in planning this training. So if you, let's do it like this. We use a 5-point system. Yeah. If you think this training that we have from Mary, mainly from Mary, a little bit from me, and also the workshop day yesterday, if you think this was useful, then you can give 5 points. If you think it was not useful, then you can give 1 point. So what is your rating? Please give your rating now. We have 1-5.
Silakan apa namanya berikan
dari
apresiasi kalau kuat berikan 5, kalau tidak kuat berikan 1.
Apa training ini berguna dan sangat
Okay. So this is important feedback for us because
Let's give a big applause.
I was not asking for applause. No, it is because it is really important for us because now we know more or less what you need or on which level you are, and for the next workshop we can have much more detailed plans how to go on and how to proceed. And before we came, we had no idea how much experience you have with GIS, with remote sensing. My feeling today was that you were extremely fast in following the training sessions of Mary. Because usually, if we do it with our students, it usually takes very long because we are losing many students on the way. But today, everybody of you was able to follow. And this was also because Mary prepared a very good, very stepwise procedure. And this is also how we will do it for the next version. So, I assume that also for the future workshops, there will be more advanced training in GIS and remote sensing. Up to now, we touched on the basics. We have not talked about classifications, about change analysis. And this is very important for you because you are very much interested in the changes over time. So this can be a specific workshop for the next time. And there are also other colleagues of Mary and mine in Göttingen who are even better to give these trainings. So it might be that next time we bring in other experts who are even more experienced in that, and we can help you to come from a beginner level to an advanced level. And maybe after 4 or 5 workshops in 3 years, you are professional level, and then you are much better than we are. So, I think with this, we can close the workshop for today. It was a very long day, very much work, very much concentration, and it was very enjoyable to work together with you. It was really fun. And let's hope that we meet again in future and that we have similar workshops also in future. Thank you very much for your patience. But Nenga, would you like to say some closing words also?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Luz, for the nice presentation and nice coach ya to all of us. Ya, adik-adik, teman-teman semuanya, ya, saya kira during the 2 days training ya, kira banyak hal yang sudah disampaikan. Barangkali nanti pada akhir dari bisa menunjukkan dari
suaranya satu kali. Ya.
Sudah.
Oke, ya. Barangkali nanti di akhir session ini panitia bisa mengumpulkan harapan-harapan ya, tertulis training ya, kalau bisa in 1 pages at least expectation for the next training. Yes, yeah. So we write down so we can planning so within the rest of our period of the project. Ya, jadi saya kira demikian, inilah sesuatu ya kertas ya, harapan-harapan yang diinginkan untuk ke depan. Sekarang sudah from this training that is triggered by the Mary presentation, Mary training ya, ya sudah dipicu oleh trainingnya Pak Mary yang saya kira memang menarik cara penyampaiannya step by step from the beginner sampai nanti mungkin advance, karena ini pasti kalau sekarang kan baru mendisplay citra saja, baru download citra sampai display gitu kan, ke depan bagaimana makanya langsung fasilitasi ya, itu kan akan menjadi lebih penting lagi gitu ya. Sekali lagi terima kasih, yang mudah-mudahan nanti tim dari konsorsium ini dengan IPB Tadulako yang selalu update terhadap keinginan-keinginan kita semua. Saya kira demikian. Sekali lagi terima kasih kepada teman-teman semuanya ya atas partisipasinya, yang saya kira partisipasi dari kemarin sampai sekarang tidak ada yang berkurang, tetap full. I thought that all of the participants stay vividly from yesterday up to now. Nobody left, but I know that the number of participants from the online increasing. Yeah, because a lot of also our colleagues, not only here, but also in Bogor, increase to bigger participate in this.
Even that today is Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday. Yeah. Okay, again, thank you very much. Let's give a big applause for us. Saya kembalikan waktunya kepada siapa? Panitia ya.
Tadi bagikan kertas, mungkin silakan dituliskan tadi what is your expectation for the next training, berapa ya? Oke,
Apakah masih ini kita lanjutkan ke step berikutnya atau bagaimana? Pokoknya silakan nih.
Ya.
Tidak usah tulis nama.
Baik, kami dari instruktur menyerahkan kembali ya, on behalf of our instructor ya. We back to committee ya, untuk baca menutup closing statement ya. Thank you for online participant also.
Partisipan
Ya. Oke, nanti ditutup panitia ya, dan juga pengumuman ya, apa kaitannya dengan sertifikat segala macam ya, silakan. Monggo Pak. Ya.
We need a group photo.
Oke, that's all. After the closing, we need a group photo. Yeah.
Before the closing, after closing.
After closing.
After.
Oke, apa closing?
Biar tidak duduk lagi.
Oh ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore. Yang saya hormati Pak Dr. Saya Dijaya, Saudara selaku koordinator Institut. Iya. Ya, Pak Dr. Malik, banyak Pak Perbata, and special instructor today, Pak Dr. Lut dan I call you Mbak Mary. Mbak Mary as the instructor today. Thank you very much for all material today. Jadi saya selaku rekan pertama-tama merasa bersyukur karena kita mendapatkan kesempatan yang luar biasa dari manfaat konsorsium yang terjalin antara Universitas Göttingen, Universitas IPB dan Universitas Sulawesi. Kami ingin menyapa dulu Pak Dr. Hendrayanto dan Pak dan Bapak Ibu dosen-dosen Fakultas Kehutanan dan Lingkungan di IPB. Terima kasih banyak telah bergabung. Jadi kami lanjutkan bahwa salah satu kemanfaatan kami kemarin sudah diberi kesempatan untuk kuliah tamu. Terima kasih banyak sekali. Dan hari ini staf kami pun bersama-sama dengan staf di Balai Besar Taman Nasional Hidup, KPH, Dinas Kehutanan, dan beberapa instansi teknis kehutanan lainnya pun mendapatkan manfaat yang luar biasa dari workshop dan pelatihan pada hari ini terkait dengan strengthening the use of spatial technology for forestry resources monitoring. Dan kami berharap bahwa apa yang didapatkan hari ini menjadi stimulus untuk bisa menyemangati kita lagi untuk bisa belajar lebih banyak, dan mudah-mudahan kami masih bisa mendapat kesempatan untuk memperdalam ilmu ini di kemudian hari. Lagi kami Prof. Menang selaku koordinator konsorsium secara institusi mengucapkan banyak terima kasih kepada Bapak dan teman-teman semua, Pak Lut dan Bu Mary, dan tidak ada yang dapat kami berikan di fakultas ini kecuali ucapan terima kasih banyak. Semoga Bapak-Bapak semua diberikan kesehatan dan umur panjang sehingga kita bisa mendapatkan manfaat yang lebih besar lagi kemudian hari. Amin. Bagi kita semua yang akan menjalankan ibadah puasa besok, alhamdulillah hari ini kita masih beri kesempatan makan siang. Ya mungkin ini bagian dari pelatihan juga. Jadi kita masih bisa sama-sama menikmati makan siang bersama. Kami mengucapkan selamat menjalankan ibadah puasa. Semoga kita sehat sehingga dilancarkan dalam menjalankan ibadah. Dan saya juga berterima kasih kepada kita semua peserta yang sudah sangat antusias sekali, staf-staf kami di Universitas Tadulako dan teman serta mitra dari instansi-instansi teknis, Dinas Kehutanan, terutama Balai Besar Taman Nasional sebagai mitra utama kita, dari KPH dan dari SDA, termasuk dari tim-tim proyek Forest Program 3 yang antusias, dan seperti sampaikan tadi, tidak ada yang move, tidak ada yang pindah dari mejanya masing-masing. Bahkan sebenarnya kalau mau ditanya titilnya, mereka berharap sampai besok. Ya. Baik, once again, thank you very much for all, and especially for Lutz, Bu Mary. We're still waiting for the next time to more deeply information related to our training today. Thank you very much, dan saya kembalikan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ya, terima kasih Pak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera buat kita sekalian. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. Yang terhormat Bapak Dekan Fakultas Kehutanan Universitas Tadulako, Prof. Nengah, Pak Tatang, Pak Lutz, dan Mbak Mary, dan teman-teman sekalian yang saya muliakan. Kami juga dari atas nama konsorsium ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Pak Dekan atas kolaborasi ini, ya. Jadi saya kira ini sangat bermanfaat buat kita, karena kebetulan ada tim dari Universitas Kontingen yang memberikan kita pencerahan. Sebenarnya kalau kita melihat tadi bahwa di Google Engine ini kan suatu open source ini, yang bisa kita ambil secara gratis dibanding kita menggunakan software yang crack ilegal. Jadi ini sehingga itu menarik, dan sebenarnya lebih banyak yang sudah disediakan yang ada di kita menggunakan Google Engine ini, karena bagaimanapun kita kalau misalnya ini kita tuliskan sebagai publikasi atau artikel, itu kan ada sumber datanya, kita ambil dari mana, software yang digunakan apa, ya. Nah, itu sangat penting di dalam publikasi, sehingga dengan adanya teman-teman memberikan pelatihan ini, dan saya juga kira ini adalah hasil daripada diskusi kita yang cukup panjang beberapa kali lewat Zoom-nya, Pak Nengah, dengan beberapa teman-teman yang di Taman Nasional, BKSDA, BPDAS. Nah, kira-kira apa yang dibutuhkan teman-teman ini untuk kita berikan dalam bentuk pelatihan. Dan alhamdulillah kalau melihat jalannya pelatihan kita pada hari ini, kayaknya ini passion atau teman-teman juga bersemangat, dan alhamdulillah saya kira teman-teman juga yang diutus dari instansi dinas kehutanan ini memang yang handal ini dengan sudah familiar, sehingga kita sebenarnya tinggal karena kita baru menggunakan ini sehingga perlu penyesuaian saja, ya. Jadi saya kira pada prinsipnya kita sudah mengerti, sehingga karena ini sesuatu yang baru menggunakan Google Engine, saya kira jadi cepat. Dan saya lihat tadi juga dalam training ini, dalam beberapa hal juga saya kira ada pengetahuan tambahan teman-teman, sehingga membiasakan diri Mbak Mary bahasa Inggris dan Pak Lutz. Dan saya lihat tadi karena frekuensinya sama, tidak selalu harus ditranslate, bisa jalan. Bagaimana saya tahu? Karena saya bisa melihat yang di display semua di komputer teman-teman itu sudah sama dengan tahapan yang ditampilkan di layar. Oke, sebelum tutup kami titip salam kepada Kepala Balai BKSDA, Kepala BPDAS, juga Kepala Balai Besar Taman Nasional, juga kepada Pak Kepala Dinas Kehutanan, juga teman-teman dari EP3. Salam, terima kasih telah bergabung kepada kami, dan sebelum kita tutup, tolong kertasnya nanti dikumpul apa yang masih ada keinginan teman-teman, dan saya kira tutorial kita pada hari ini sebenarnya belum nyampe, masih banyak yang bisa modifikasi berdasarkan apa yang sudah kita ambil tadi. Jadi oleh karena itu, karena kita juga soalnya konsorsium ini masih lama, dan saya mengharapkan teman-teman yang ada hari ini bisa sebagai member, kalau perlu kami akan mengusulkan kepada kepala balai, kepada dinas, untuk teman-teman untuk ikut lagi ke depan, sehingga bukan lagi yang baru, sehingga kita bisa lanjutkan program-program ini. Itulah barangkali apa yang kami bisa sampaikan dari atas nama tim konsorsium. Kami ucapkan terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan kita masih bisa jumpa lagi, sehingga betul-betul sharing daripada teman-teman dari Universitas Göttingen ini kita bisa manfaatkan. Karena saya melihat teman-teman semua, apa yang Mbak Mary punya, apa yang Pak Lutz tahu, itu semua bisa diberikan kepada kita sekalian. Mudah-mudahan ini bermanfaat untuk institusi dan untuk Provinsi Sulawesi Tengah, di mana kita mengabdi. Pengetahuan ini kita manfaatkan untuk banyak hal sebenarnya. Ya. Nah, kebetulan kita tadi banyak sampel di Taman Nasional Lorelindo. Nah, demikianlah barangkali apa yang kami bisa sampaikan. Saya ucapkan sekali lagi terima kasih juga buat kolega-kolega yang dari IPB, khususnya Pak Endrayanto dan teman-teman lain. Terima kasih telah bergabung bersama kami, dan saya kira ini juga memberikan kita, tim konsorsium ini, lebih semangat lagi Pak, memberikan spirit ini atas kehadiran our colleagues from IPB University who also attend our activities even they are not here. Oke, saya kira terima kasih dengan mengucapkan alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, kegiatan workshop yang sejak kemarin dan training pada hari ini kami nyatakan ditutup. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan untuk teman-teman, kami siapkan sertifikat, dan nanti juga ada yang diparap-parap sedikit di luar ini. Ya, mudah-mudahan ada manfaatnya. Oh, masih ada yang itu? Iya.
Ya, itu ngarep sini ya, backgroundnya kan ini.
One more. Foto.
Oh iya. Bantu kita ya, posisi gini aja kali Pak. Dari sana bisa.
Sambil gini aja berdiri, kalau di sini numpuk nanti naik. Iya, bisa gini.
Ah, bisa. Oh iya, kita berdiri saja di tempat masing-masing deh. Yang di belakang tolong maju deh. Oh ya, maju.
Bagian-bagian ke sana, nggak apa-apa.
Ya.
One inside.
Siap.
Ya, ini.
Wajib sini dong.
Ya, buat
Ya, betul.
Iya.
Dekat siapa?
Pak Mama bisa berangkat.
Dapat nggak?
Sorry. Ya, bisa. Ya, ke kiri. Oke, dapat. Asik ya. Tapi tahan ya, 1, 2, 3, tahan. Oke. Oke. Bacakan sempurna dulu ya. Oke. 1, 2, 3. Oke, one more terus. Oke, 1, 2, 3. One more, oke.
Freestyle.
Ya. Freestyle, oke. 1, 2, 3. Oke.
Ya.
Aku langsung selesai. Karena tadi
Kalau itu mau mulai berangkat, akhirnya saya dapat pulang bagian juga. Dan saya jadi teman-teman peserta nanti kami akan minta tanda tangan untuk